bills are going up again. And you promised breakfast viewers just before the election campaign that you would be the Prime Minister who brought those bills down. Are you going to be able to keep that promise?
Yes, it's a really important promise. And already what we're doing is bringing the bills down by £150 for millions of households with the scheme that we are running. So that is really important as a start. But there's a bigger challenge, which is we have to get the bills down for those at home and actually for businesses as well. And I've made it absolutely clear that all the policies that we need in order to bring those bills down need to be pursued, because for many people they're one of the biggest household bills, and for businesses the energy costs are a constant feature.
You mentioned the help for poorer families, but when you made that promise during the election, you were talking about all people, and you put a figure on it. You talked about trying to bring down families' energy bills by up to £300 a year. In fact, since you entered Downing Street, they've gone up by nearly £200 a year. So there's no way you're going to be able to stick to that promise, is there?
Bringing down the bills by 150 is for a number of households, millions of households.
What about the 300?
But I'm not railing against your challenge, which is that we need to bring all of these bills down. And putting the policies in place to do that is really important to me personally. That's the commitment I made. Obviously, a large part of this is driven by what's happening in Ukraine. Bills are 75% higher because of the conflict in Ukraine.
But that had happened before you made that promise,
Well, I appreciate that. So what we need to do is to work with others to resolve the situation in Ukraine, to work again on the £150 we're bringing off bills, and to do more, to meet your challenge, to ensure that we are able to bring those bills down, which is the commitment that I made.
OK, so just to be absolutely clear, you are still sticking to that £300 promise?
I want to bring energy bills down significantly for families by the next election. And that's
by £300?
Well, yes, £300 is the amount we put out there, but I know the commitment I made, and I'm determined we're going to bring those bills down, because I know what an impact they've had on people struggling to make ends meet and living through what must seem like a continuous and continuing cost of living crisis.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer is discovering that campaign promises have a way of catching up with you. His high-profile pledge to cut household energy bills by £300 a year, once a confident centerpiece of Labour's election pitch, is now a source of political embarrassment. Instead of delivering the promised relief, average bills have risen by nearly £200 since he took office. The problem came into sharp focus during a combative interview with the BBC's John Kay, who pressed Starmer on why the pledge had not materialised. "You promised you would be the Prime Minister that brought bills down," Kay said. "You talked about bringing family energy bills down by £300 a year. Since you've entered Downing Street, they've gone up by nearly £200. Starmer responded by pointing to the Sown 150 support package for low-income households, arguing that the government was helping millions of vulnerable families. But Kay was quick to note that the Sown 150 measure falls far short of the universal £300 cut promised during the campaign. Faced with this reality, Starmer could offer only determination rather than results. "I know the commitment I made, and I'm determined we're going to bring those bills down." He sought to shift some of the blame to external factors, particularly the war in Ukraine, which he said had driven energy costs 75% higher. Yet that explanation has limited political power. As Kay pointed out, those global pressures were already well known at the time the pledge was made. The exchange highlighted a growing credibility gap. If bills have climbed by £200 since the election, simply cutting them by £300 would not meet the original promise. It would take a £500 reduction to return families to where they expected to be. Starmer dodged that uncomfortable arithmetic, insisting only that he wanted to bring bills down significantly by the next election. For a prime minister who campaigned on restoring trust in politics, the gap between rhetoric and delivery is becoming a vulnerability. Voters who believed they would see meaningful reductions in their bills may now question not only the government's competence, but also its honesty. In politics, perception matters as much as numbers. The 300 figure was simple, memorable, and politically potent, which makes its apparent elusiveness all the more damaging. Unless the government can show clear progress soon, The pledge risks becoming a symbol of over-promising and under-delivering, a political liability that opponents will exploit relentlessly in the run-up to the next election.
I certainly was surprised at some of the rhetoric and the tone about the speech that I watched. And I have to say, I would balance that with saying I was pleasantly surprised at the Prime Minister's demeanor and performance. It wasn't what I was expecting from him. He clearly doesn't feel comfortable in that type of environment. But immediately afterwards, his party colleagues were coming to say what a great job he'd done. And I heard Rachel Reeves, for example, to pick up on the point about Nigel Farage. And I think she said it was worse than racism. It was immoral. And so a number of them made comments like that. So they're kind of doubling down on their attack on Farage. And of course, Keir Starmer joked and said, he referred to the Tory party and said, "Do you remember them?" And, you know, so he didn't mention Kemi Badenoch by name. It was all about Keir Starmer.
But that very much surely doesn't do reform any harm, because when you're attacking reform, you're also attacking the people who like reform, and they're just going to become even more entrenched in wanting to vote for their local Reform MP come the next election, Mark. Surely, if you were advising Labour, isn't it just classier just not to mention them?
That's right. And, you know, we've seen President Trump, you know, made an art form out of referring to people in a negative way, often giving them a nickname or a title. And, you know, it worked for him. And, you know, talking about the opposition is never a good strategy. And, you know, I see the focus on Nigel Farage, but you know, the one thing I would say that's different that we've yet to see with reform is the depth and strength of the panel, the bench behind him. You know, we have seen with President Trump when he can command the microphone, can work Twitter and the likes to as a fine art. He has a team of people behind him who are experienced deal makers, diplomats, peacemakers, and others. So we've now got to start to see some of the substance. But I think Nigel Farage will be very happy that the debate stays at this very high level.